the more human we'll be. This is Cisco.
BMW really exemplifies quality, driver experience, luxury, but it's not pretentious. There's an emotional thing, the way the car sounds.
BMW as the leading premium brand in the world, I mean, for us to go ahead and continue with that, we have to continue to deliver what customers need. If that's all about digital services.
The expectations towards digital products really high. Nowadays you have home automation and everything, you're expecting those things. And then if you invest into a premium product of a premium brand, you expect that comes out of the box.
It's really critically important that you be able to do that at a global scale. We want that same experience to be for our customer that's in China, that's the same experience in North America, or the same experience in Europe.
We are no longer competing with Daimler or Audi or Lexus. I mean, for us, we're competing in the digital space. Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft. We have to get data as quickly as possible so that we can take action. A big part of that will be through AppDynamics.
So I've got a lot of experience with AppDynamics. This is the third company that I've implemented AppDynamics at. At the technical level, it gives you an MRI of your enterprise, where you can see all those corresponding layers. We can see the cloud, we can see the services. I can orchestrate that and roll that into the enterprise so quickly. With AppDynamics, you get also incredible insight into customer behavior.
So then you have the DevOps teams underneath, the real feature teams. They are building all these features. So with a strong technical domain model and a DevOps model applied on that, we are spearheading and guiding in a way agile principles combined with tooling.
It's central that we drive that innovation and we drive that experience for our customers. And to me, I just don't have to worry about it, right? I've got this partner with AppDynamics. I've got this kick-ass tool that helps us deal with this complexity issue. And I just can rely on that.
AppDynamics is a very robust platform for us to improve our product today. We'll look at it as something where not only how we're operating, but how we should go ahead and build our development environment going forward.
Hi, I'm Chuck Robbins, Chairman and CEO of Cisco. Thank you all for joining in today for the first ever AppDynamics virtual launch event. I could not be more excited to help kick things off and celebrate the 2-year anniversary of when we announced our intent to acquire AppDynamics. AppD empowers enterprises with solutions for real-time application monitoring and business performance analytics. And together, we are helping companies make strategic, mission-critical decisions that improve customer experience and accelerate business growth in a complex multi-cloud world. AppD has been at the forefront of helping our customers lead digital transformation for their businesses, and applications have become the foundation of every customer's business. This is how they engage, buy, consume goods and services, and drive revenue for their organizations. They have also helped transform the careers of many IT leaders, making them agents of transformation for their business and industries. Today, you will hear more from David and the team who will share what the next chapter of AppD and Cisco looks like. As we continue to build even more integration across Cisco, we look forward to helping our customers along their journeys. I hope you enjoy the rest of the broadcast, and thank you.
Thanks, Chuck, and really appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to AppDynamics Transform. This is the first of a series of conversations that we hope to host with all of you around the evolution of the IT ops and automation. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Nancy Goring, Senior Analyst from 451 Research, and Anuj Kapoor, Chief Strategy Officer for Cisco. It's amazing for me to see the interest in this topic. Clearly, all of you find this topic absolutely time-sensitive for what you see in the ecosystems that you run today. We have over 4,000 people registered today. Many of you are longtime AppDynamics customers, and we're really excited to share some new news with you today about really what we see as the next chapter for AppDynamics. We're also thrilled to see so many new people to AppDynamics joining us for the very first time to learn more about what we do and where we're going with automation in the future. So excited to have all of you with us as well. And we're going to spend some time throughout the session today level setting on what we've done in the past so you understand where we've been and why we're in such a good position to take you into the world of automation and ultimately with AIOps. And welcome also to the incredible set of partners that we've been working with over the last few years. This is an area that we've been investing in very significantly around partner ecosystem, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. The thing that really strikes me also is how globally relevant this topic is. We have people streaming in and watching this video from 80 countries today, representing virtually every industry and companies of virtually every size. We have some of the largest companies in the world watching today, and we have some of the world's newest hot startups tuned in as well. And so really excited about all that diversity. But what makes today particularly special for me is that, as Chuck said, this is the 2-year anniversary of the day we announced that Cisco was acquiring AppDynamics. And in many ways, that acquisition really began our journey into automation. Prior to the acquisition, we were focused on APM as the foundation of everything we did. What the acquisition really did was it gave us a much broader investment profile and a much larger platform to think much bigger about where we can go on your behalf in the years ahead. And it's been a very busy 2 years. Now, we've continued to invest in the traditional investment areas that we've done in the past, like application monitoring and business monitoring, but we've also laid the foundation for a much more meaningful play in automation. In the context of application monitoring, we've always been the market leader here when it comes to coverage, and we've focused very significant investments over the last 2 years here. We've introduced support for Docker, we've introduced support for Kubernetes, Pivotal Cloud Foundry, SPA, .NET Core, Couchbase, Async 2.0, just to name a few. In addition to focusing on the application models, we also expanded what we covered. We added support for network visibility and IoT. And many of our largest customers said, well, this is exciting to see us investing so significantly in new capabilities for new application development models. They also wanted us to remember that in their large environments and their heterogeneous environments, they needed to make sure that those new investments that they made continued to work with the investments they made over the last few years in things like mainframe and IIB and SAP. So we added support for all of those as well, really making us the broadest application visibility and monitoring platform in the world, all the way from some of the greatest new technologies in the market to some of the oldest. And we look at all of that as one integrated application topology so you understand how the old stuff is impacting the new stuff and how the new stuff is really starting to give you a more dynamic environment. Now, in addition to monitoring and coverage, one of the things we recognized is the importance of scale. If you think back to when we were founded 10 years ago, customers were buying AppDynamics to monitor a few hundred virtual machines, predominantly in pre-production environments. Today, we see customers buying AppDynamics to monitor hundreds of thousands of virtual machines, largely in production environments. So we're very excited about seeing how people are starting to change the way they build and deploy their applications, and we are very focused on staying ahead of any scale needs that you have in your organization. Now, beyond application monitoring, we realized a few years ago that one of the key things is if we're going to be monitoring every line of code for application performance, we also see all the semantics of your business flowing through that code. Things like revenue and conversion rates, they're all visible to us, and we're able to tap into that information without you having to change any code yourself. And so 2 years ago, we introduced this idea of Business IQ. And in my career, I've never seen anything have the kind of adoption rate that Business IQ has. It's been an incredible success story with our customers, and we're now starting to get pulled into things like digital experience management in real time in many of our customer sites as well. Here, too, we've made significant enhancements. We've focused our attention on dynamic baselines of business metrics. So you can now start to see how revenue is trending on a Tuesday morning versus a Wednesday evening versus the weekend. And as we start to build out these dynamic baselines for your business metrics, we're able to detect anomalies and alert you when your business metrics seem to be having some issues as well. Beyond looking at any individual transaction, we also started to invest significantly in tracking performance across multiple related business transactions, so you can watch what your customer's user journey is over a few hours or over a few days or months, and start to see what patterns you're seeing in those behaviors as well. So application monitoring and business monitoring, that foundation, we're continuing to invest in very, very heavily. And last, but certainly not least, we've used the opportunity to lay the foundation for AIOps. Now, we put together PhDs from AppDynamics, from Cisco, and from Perspica, which is a company we acquired a year ago, into a single team with decades of collective experience in AI and ML. And we've not only done that, but we've really focused on pulling a team together that has AI ML experience as it applies to IT operations in particular. So they understand the metrics that you're looking at. They understand the relationship of those metrics, and they understand how those metrics really apply to potential incidents that may be forming. And as you'll see in a few minutes, we've made significant progress on the frameworks for identification and resolution of those problems. Now, in addition to product innovation, we've also invested very heavily in how we engage with all of you. We've grown our investment in our direct engagement, and for those of you who have worked with us for years, you recognize that this has been an area of real personal pride that AppDynamics has taken. We look at our account managers and we expect them to understand your business as well as you understand your own business, so that we can have conversations with you about the outcomes you're looking to drive as opposed to technology we want you to buy. And we've continued to make that a cornerstone of how we engage with our customers. But in addition to the direct engagement model, we've made a big investment now in a partner ecosystem, largely brought to us by Cisco. And this has been working incredibly well. The partner ecosystem business year over year grew 250%. And we see this as an opportunity to reach a lot more people with a lot more depth in the years ahead. So to help take advantage of this, we've formalized a process called Joint Success Planning, which is a process and a template that we work with all of you on as you start a new project with us, or as you onboard into AppDynamics for the very first time. And this platform will give us an opportunity to have a conversation with you around what you need to do to drive business outcomes, both in terms of the traditional uses of AppDynamics around visibility, but also as we move forward into the world of automation and AIOps. And it turns out that if you have a best-of-breed enterprise product and you have a best-of-breed enterprise engagement model and you make them better, it has some real benefits. We're very proud today to say that AppDynamics is now the largest APM vendor in the space and the fastest growing APM vendor in the space, growing 4 times faster than the market and faster than any other individual vendor at scale. But more importantly, what we've done in the last 2 years is lay the foundation for an AIOps journey in the years ahead. One that doesn't require you to boil the ocean, but instead one that lets you move forward incrementally and at a pace that makes sense for you and for your organization. We're investing very heavily here, frankly, because you've asked us to. You told us that your users are demanding an amazing digital experience. And the reality is they mean it. And if you look at the statistics here, it's estimated that $6 trillion of existing revenue will shift from companies that are viewed as digital laggards to companies that are viewed as digital leaders. As a result, we see enterprises really investing in velocity, because I think everyone realizes today velocity wins. There's no such thing as a big bang release anymore. Releases today are about releasing a good application and then iterating 1,000 times to perfect it. And the difference between the winners and the losers, or the people on the right side of that $6 trillion shift and the wrong side of the $6 trillion shift, is that the winners iterate those 1,000 times faster. It's as simple as that. And of course, the need for a high velocity business is driving the need for a high velocity environment. As a result, we see many of our customers starting to modernize their traditional old 3-tier architectures by breaking the monolithic applications into smaller service-oriented architectures. We also see many of you lifting and shifting those new services into one or more public clouds. We see you adopting microservices running on Docker or Kubernetes for new services, and also for some of the old services that you've migrated over. And we see you pushing further down the distributed architecture models with things like serverless and things like Lambda on AWS. We also see a meaningful number of you pushing into hyper-converged and private cloud environments, further distributing your application development processes. And while all of these modern investments continue to grow quickly, many of our larger organizations, as I mentioned earlier, continue to rely on legacy stacks like mainframe and SAP, amongst others. Of course, all of this increasingly distributed environment ultimately sits in service of a great user experience. And overall, this has been terrific, right? I mean, you think about it, individual DevOps teams today can focus on their services. They can release more frequently, they can react to users continuously, they can respond to competitors quicker. And that, of course, is until something goes wrong and the users start to experience a problem. Was it the thread contention issue in an instance of your authentication service that caused the problem? Was it a configuration change in your private cloud environment that caused the problem? Or was it a network policy change in your traditional data center that caused a problem? These small problems, these small changes can have significant system-wide impact. Applications today are simply too complex and too dynamic, and developers are releasing too frequently to manage all of this manually. You need to automate the discovery and remediation of these problems. And so with that, I'm thrilled to have Nancy Goring join us from 451 Research to share her perspective on what the industry is seeing. Nancy?
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about what's all the buzz behind machine learning and IT ops. And a lot of it comes down to the increasing complexity of the modern IT environment, just like David touched on. So instead of this traditional monolith, you've got many more moving pieces. You've got containers, you may have a serverless environment, you might be using an orchestration tool for your containers, and then you've got your legacy gear also. So this is creating a much more challenging environment, particularly when it comes to IT operations and ensuring that your applications are performing as the best they can. So just to sort of drive home or sort of demonstrate this growing complexity, let's look just at containers. So these are some obviously very large environments. These are big web scale businesses. But if you think of, say, Google, which in the middle of last year said they were launching 4 billion new containers every week, traditionally, you would want to collect some bit of data each time one of those containers spins up and when it spins down. You might want to collect some other metrics about the performance of that container while it's running. So right there within 1 week, that's an enormous volume of data that you would traditionally want to collect in order to troubleshoot when you have performance problems. So not only is that an enormous volume of data that you have to handle, it begins to raise new questions about what exactly you should be collecting. What do you want to collect? Do you need to know about each one of those containers if you're spinning up 4 billion every week? Or should you be relying on automation or orchestration tools to manage that for you and decrease that complexity a bit? So, and that's just containers, right? So if you're using serverless or a whole bunch of other technologies that are increasingly common in modern organizations, that just really increases the complexity even more. So against that backdrop, the pressure to ensure really top performance is only growing. So this is actually a relatively old quote, maybe some of you have seen, but I think it really drives home how important performance is. So this is a guy who created Amazon's recommendations engine, and he once said that every 100 milliseconds delay costs 1% of sales. So when you're Amazon, that's potentially an enormous amount of money, but even if you're not, any organization doesn't want to lose 1% of sales because their application is slow, because there's more latency than it should have. So latency is an issue. People want to drive the performance of their application because it's impacting the bottom line. Outages, obviously, are also a huge problem. So it's very expensive. So this is from a study that the Uptime Institute did, where they asked organizations how much downtime costs, and nearly 50% said that downtime incidents cost more than $100,000. And actually 26% said that a downtime incident costs between $100,000 and $500,000. So downtime is really expensive, latency is expensive, and at the same time, organizations are being asked to do more with less. So this was a recent study we did when we were particularly talking to IT infrastructure teams, and we asked about their amount of work, how their amount of work had changed over the last year. The majority said that it had gone up. We then asked them how the size of their team, how their staffing had changed over the past year. Most had stayed the same. A fair number had actually decreased. So you've got all of these challenges with your complex systems. You've got pressure for your applications to perform really well, and yet your team is potentially shrinking and certainly not growing. So what do you do? And this, I would say, is really creating the environment for machine learning. And I think that machine learning can have some really immediate positive impacts if you're in this type of environment. And what's, I think, really interesting is that we're beginning to see that once you have machine learning in place, it actually opens the door for some other really interesting opportunities around things like automation and getting better business insights. So on the more basic level, once you've got a machine learning driven tool in place in your IT operations organization, you can get some really immediate benefits. So for instance, you might be able to begin discovering problems in advance so that you can fix them before they actually occur. You can begin to get better event correlation, which solves a lot of the headaches that I hear people complain about around alert fatigue and sort of drowning in alerts. So if you're able to intelligently correlate events so that you can understand that this huge volume of alerts and events coming in are actually all related to a single incident, then you actually also open the door for your tool to be able to help you with root cause identification, right? So if you're able to understand that this volume of events and alerts that's happening are all related, then you can better understand which one actually indicates the problem so that you can quickly solve it. But once you've got this in place, you have the opportunity to do some really interesting things, like automation. So automation is this theme that people in IT ops have been talking about for years, and there's been a lot of fear, there's been some reluctance to embrace automation. There's this sort of perennial concern that you're gonna embrace automation and you're gonna accidentally kick off some sort of action that's going to make the problem worse or actually create new problems. But if you've got these machine learning tools in place that are intelligently and accurately diagnosing a problem, then you can much more smartly kick off an automated response that can solve a problem for you and allow you to do more with less. And this is definitely something that teams are looking for. So we asked IT infrastructure teams about their preferred approach to management, and their top response was automation. So obviously teams really want to embrace automation. It's just been challenging to do so in a way that they can be confident that it's actually going to solve the problem and help them out. So you've got machine learning in place. There's a number of really clear benefits, right? So one is problems get solved faster. You're not trying to understand how a bunch of different events are related. You're actually presented with information that helps you identify that problems are happening and what the cause is so that you can quickly solve them. Once you've got that in place, you're going to be able to free up your people to do more interesting things, right? So your skills on your team can be put to much better use on mission-critical projects. And you also can begin to enable new use cases, particularly by business users. So there's a growing recognition that the data that you're collecting about your IT operations can be valuable beyond performance. So historically, people collect data and information about their IT operations for a performance use case, right? In order to more quickly understand when problems are occurring and then to be able to address those problems. But it's beginning to be understood that if you're able to correlate the performance of your application with important business metrics, you can better understand how the performance of your application actually impacts the business. And in organizations that are digitally transformed and that understand how important software is to their business, this can be really valuable. And again, it is becoming very clear that organizations are beginning to understand the value of this data. So we did a survey about data and analytics. So it was a broad survey, and we asked respondents about what types of data they most commonly were analyzing. And IT infrastructure data was the second most common data source that they cited. And I think that this isn't specifically asking them about the business use case, but I think the fact that IT infrastructure data came up so high, it was ranked so important in this survey, really indicates the value that organizations see in IT infrastructure data. And again, opens the door to new use cases. So with that, I'll invite David back.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. That was a lot of information you covered, but really distilled down to a few core thoughts, right? The first is that enterprises are going through this process by which their environments are becoming increasingly more complex. Second is that budgets are not growing to keep pace with the complexity, and they're flat to maybe slightly down, and that's really driving the need for reliance on automation and a focus on that. That, I think, context is one that I'm certainly seeing play out across the industry. What advice do you have? I mean, we have a lot of people here who are dealing with that today, in a real way. What advice do you have for them in terms of how they can actually start the process?
Yeah, I think it's really good to start by measuring where you are, and then you can pick off the easy wins. And I think that when I talk to organizations, a lot of people don't do that. They sort of actually sometimes struggle with trying to figure out what to measure. But the interesting thing is also, once they do begin to measure their own team performance and what are the tasks that they're spending a ton of time on, sometimes they're a little bit surprised. So there are some things that maybe they didn't realize people were spending a ton of time on. Other things that are just maybe super annoying, they thought they were spending more time than they actually are. Once you figure out what you're spending a ton of time on, then you should begin to look at kind of what are the easy wins, like what are sort of the obvious easy things that you could automate. And then I would advise people to dip your toe in, start automating some simple things that will have a big payoff, and then measure the results. Because it's so important to sort of close that loop and understand the benefits that you're actually getting once you start adopting it.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, I've certainly seen some of the best enterprises that are starting to move down this way. Best practices, take inventory of what people are doing, exactly like you said. I've actually seen people actually associate amount of time for each action as well, and then start to catalog when they start to automate some of the easier, safer automations, start to catalog how much time they're really saving that they can reinvest in innovation.
Exactly.
So, and then that gamifies the whole thing and people start to really move down that path.
True.
Thank you so much for your time,
Thank
Nancy.
you.
Appreciate it. Great, so really a lot covered there. And with that as the background, let's see what AppDynamics can help here, because we, as we talked about earlier, can help give you a lot more visibility into what's really happening. And as we discussed, we're starting to move down the path of using AI and ML to actually help identify the root cause and start the automation process. So really quickly, for those of you who are new to AppDynamics, we were founded about 10 years ago. The focus of what we did was application monitoring. We started with Java, we added .NET, PHP, Node.js, and a slew of additional app models that we talked about earlier in the segment. And we did it so that we were monitoring these services in a way that was not in isolation, but in a way that was truly connected, regardless of whether some of them were running in data centers, some of them were running in private cloud environments, and some were running in public cloud environments. We created a holistic view that you could then start to understand the living, breathing, dynamic view that you were living with. We quickly realized, however, that we needed to look at visibility beyond the application. monitoring anything really in the entire stack that was affecting the application experience. So we added support for a broad range of things like databases and server monitoring. We added support for network monitoring as well to identify if, say, a network latency or a packet loss issue was impacting the application. Even, by the way, if that network was running in an opaque environment like a public cloud. We moved up the stack as well to monitor end user experiences, end users in the browser, using mobile applications, and more recently, support for IoT devices as well. And we recognized ultimately that all of this stuff, monitoring the application, needed to change because applications no longer sat solely in support of a business. In many cases, your applications now are your business. So we introduced Business IQ to correlate how the technology decisions you were making day in and day out were impacting true business outcomes like revenue and conversion rates or any other business metric that matters in real time. And ultimately, we identify anomalies that we see, and we provide you the tools to find the root cause. Now, this has been the focus of AppDynamics over the last decade and has fundamentally changed how many of our customers work. And while we'll continue to aggressively invest in this area, we also couldn't be more excited to start the next phase of AppDynamics, which is to start to use AI and ML to directly identify the root cause of a problem and to leverage that root cause to help you automate the remediation of an incident when it does occur. Now, over the next 20 minutes, we'll show you the latest advances that we have in application visibility, and then we'll introduce you to our all-new Cognition Engine that automatically identifies root cause and ultimately will help you automate the remediation. So I'd like to start with the visibility piece, and I'd like to welcome up Whitney Satin, our Senior Manager in Product Marketing, to show us on visibility. Whitney.
Thank you, David. You kicked off the broadcast talking about how AppDynamics provides the broadest coverage across the application landscape, and I wanted to give an example of what that looks like in practice. So we're going to walk through an e-commerce application. I'm sure many of our viewers are familiar with the process of online shopping, where you log into your account, you scroll through a catalog, find something you really like, add it to the cart, put in your payment details, and then hopefully that electric toothbrush shows up a couple days later at your door.
Hygiene is important.
It certainly is. So that sounds like a very straightforward process from the end user experience, but of course there's a whole host of complexity from a technology perspective that has to work in order for that transaction to go through. And that's really where AppDynamics comes into play. We install a lightweight agent across your entire application landscape. And this agent is going to automatically discover all the different services, the back-end databases, the calls out to third parties, all those different hops in between, all those interdependencies that need to function in order to make that application work. And we visualize that with what you see on the screen here in our flow map.
Right, and this flow map, just for everyone to make sure you understand, this flow map represents all of your services, regardless of where they're running, right? So this is truly a multi-cloud ecosystem where some of these services might be running in a private data center, some of them might be running in a public cloud, some might be running in a private cloud somewhere, and it doesn't matter. We really do the job of abstracting away the infrastructure it's running on and building out the application topology and then showing you the relationship between these services, what these services are doing with each other, because no service runs in isolation.
That's absolutely right. And we're watching all of the traffic that's taking place across this entire ecosystem. And we're collecting a number of metrics. And you see a few examples of that across the bottom of the screen here. So things like the load, things like the response time, any errors that we're seeing across those different hops. And we're using this information to create a dynamic baseline. And this is going to give our IT ops teams a very clear indication of what normal performance looks like for their particular application. And that way, when they start to see some peaks above the norm, they can proactively start to address some of those slowdowns before end users are impacted.
Right.
Now, I want to talk for a moment here about the data model that AppDynamics uses. We categorize everything as a business transaction. And the way to think about that is all the different services that are connected together that really map what the end user is experiencing on the front end. And this is going to give our teams a very clear idea of where in the application experience a user may run into trouble if there's any potential slowdown. And it's also going to give me a very clear idea of where I need to prioritize my efforts should I see something in the environment. So for example, I can see here on my checkout business transaction, there's some slowdown. And as an e-commerce site, that checkout functionality is absolutely critical to my business. So we're going to take care of that first before anything goes wrong. Now, AppDynamics is automatically capturing snapshots of what's happening in that environment when we see something, an anomaly outside the baseline. And this is going to include some very detailed information about what was going on with that particular transaction. And so if I double click into this one, it's actually going to give me an isolated view of all the different dependencies in this particular functionality here. And if I click in further, I can actually see that 100% of my time was being spent in this particular area. So now my teams have all the information they need to go and very quickly isolate that problem and solve what's going on.
Right, and basically what we've done is, as we talked about earlier, you have the full flow map, which is a topological look at your services across all the different multi-cloud environments they might be running in. And what the business transaction represents is an individual user taking an individual action, and to be able to go all the way down to seeing the associated transaction at the level of code. That's really the power, right? You have the broad view of seeing everything, and when necessary, you can go really deep and see the details of the code that was being executed when a specific person took a specific action.
Exactly. And now it's not just about going deeper into the application, we're also collecting quite a bit of information about at the server and network level. So giving you that view, that correlated view into your infrastructure. So here, for example, is an application, a dashboard that we might be looking at for our server behavior. And here we're looking at things like the CPU, the memory. And we can even get down to the specific processes that are consuming memory and consuming CPU. And we're also doing this across your network. So we're looking at things like TCP loss or things like throughput. Again, all of these are different data points that are going to enable our teams to really quickly diagnose what's going on and take corrective action. Now, it's not just about going deeper into the infrastructure. We're also connecting it to what the end user is experiencing. So here, for example, are a couple of high-end dashboards that are going to help our teams isolate. Perhaps there's a certain latency issue that's only impacting a particular geography, or perhaps it's something that's experiencing a specific browser or mobile device. At the end of the day, all of this is designed to create one contiguous data set from the end user into the application, and then deep into the infrastructure to understand our performance.
Right, and that's something I think is really important, especially for folks new to AppDynamics to truly understand that end-to-end nature. Again, from being able to look at it from the application perspective, dive into the server or network layer, and go all the way up to the user layer as well and see this. And we've seen so many customers really leverage this, in particular associated with cloud migration, right?
That's right.
NASDAQ, as an example, was one of the first to come to us. They had just made a series of acquisitions while they were also migrating to the cloud. It became too much to look at and deal with without understanding the full topology. So they brought AppDynamics in, monitored everything before, during, and after the migration to the cloud, and they were able to do it with more confidence and move much more quickly as a result.
Now, you mentioned earlier about the importance of connecting this back to the business. And so I want to show you an example. So as our agents are collecting information about the application, we're also collecting all of that metadata. So we can provide feedback on things like the revenue, or perhaps the number of toothbrushes in each individual order going through. And all of this is going to enable our teams to correlate the application performance to some pretty critical business outcomes. And so in a slightly different view, I have here my typical conversion funnel, where on the left side of the screen, we're looking at how customers are progressing through different steps of that conversion funnel. And on the right-hand side, we're looking at that application performance, those associated business transactions. And so my eye is very quickly drawn to this red dot over here. So I know that my checkout functionality is performing below the baseline from a business perspective of what I would expect. And if you remember to the start of the demo, we actually saw that that checkout business transaction was indeed experiencing some latency.
Right, and that again gets back to a little bit of the magic of AppDynamics, because we are watching every line of code. We can start to extract the things that are relevant in the business. Now, this is one of the more obvious examples in terms of consumer workflow. Revenue, conversion rates really matter, and that's a great one to demo with. But really, any metric that matters to your business is what matters and can be sort of gathered and baselined this way. One of my favorites is one of the largest airlines in the US is using Business IQ to watch number of passengers getting on planes and number of passengers getting off planes by city, so that they would know that Atlanta is going to have a backup before the gate agents in Atlanta even know that. So that's the power of this, because you get to see all of this in real time, and you get to understand if I made a change to something in my technology stack, did it start to affect the business both on the negative or on the positive?
Now, I want to do a quick recap of some of the foundational concepts that we just covered here. So, as we clearly saw, we're able to get some very deep baselines that are going to enable our IT ops teams to very quickly detect any sort of anomaly in the performance of the application, regardless of where it may be taking place in the ecosystem. We're going to use that information to quickly identify the root cause of the issue. And then, as we just discussed, we're able to take that information, correlate it back to the business, and really tie our IT performance with business outcomes. Now, you spoke at the beginning of the broadcast here about the notion that we are extending our visibility to legacy architectures, things like SAP and mainframe, as well as some cloud-native architectures like Kubernetes, Docker. Well, I'm very pleased to announce that we are extending that visibility one step further. And today we're launching our serverless agent for AWS Lambda. And this is going to enable teams to monitor the functions that may be operating in a serverless environment, connect it to the broader application performance, and tie it to business outcomes, all in the name of providing that seamless end-user experience, regardless of where the code may be sitting.
Great. Thank you so much, Whitney.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. So thanks again, Whitney. And again, just to sort of summarize that, unparalleled end-to-end visibility from network to infrastructure to application to user experience to business, right? And that all happening in what is an increasingly complex distributed environment that Nancy and I talked about earlier. So instead of hearing directly from us about all of this, let's hear from some customers who've used AppDynamics to help transform themselves with more confidence. Let's listen.
We see the industry is changing so fast. The speed at which things operate are not like they were even just 5 years ago.
If you were to look at the market, the way the technologies are evolving and advancing with the likes of AI and IoT, the demand for performance is more important than it's ever been. We need to be leading edge.
The customers expect everything to be available 100% of the time, and they expect everything to happen as soon as they click the button.
Customer experience is your business experience now. That's how they gauge us as an organization. Within seconds, you've gone from having a little problem by one customer and it's escalated halfway around the world.
For Carhartt, relationships are a big driver in how we do business. And it became really clear that AppDynamics had that right culture to work with Carhartt, that sense of urgency and what was the art of the possible, so to speak.
Since we've had AppDynamics in place, it's created a one pane of glass experience across development and operations to truly understand what customers are experiencing and how the system is performing.
We're maniacal about solving issues even before customers notice. With AppDynamics, we could actually find these things faster.
At the technical level, it gives you an MRI of your enterprise, where you can see all those corresponding layers. We can see the cloud, we can see these services. I can orchestrate that and roll that into the enterprise so quickly.
Our use cases for AppDynamics are not just in IT. We're also using it to create business dashboards and give business insight.
With Business IQ, we were really able to put our data into one platform and one dashboard and unify how we were able to access all of it.
When you're talking about AIOps, running a world-class infrastructure and having customers rely on you for everything that they do, you have to have insights.
The insights that we can get from AppDynamics is really key to us becoming a world-class product.
If we don't have AppDynamics, it would be really like driving a car at 100 miles per hour with your eyes closed. You can't afford not having the visibility that AppDynamics provides to our infrastructure.
So customers from every industry and of every size of company have turned to AppDynamics to help make sure that their modern distributed architectures continue to perform well and work to deliver the kind of experiences their customers are demanding. You have our commitment that we will continue to aggressively invest in this part of our stack, the visibility that we provide you over the years ahead. But over the last couple of years, as I mentioned earlier, we've also taken the data and the correlation of that data from that best-of-breed visibility platform, and we fed it into the brand new AIML engine that we've been working on. So with that, I'm thrilled to announce our all-new Cognition Engine. The Cognition Engine gets data from that end-to-end visibility platform and identifies the anomalies that are forming and suggests the likely root cause without any configuration on your part. All of that insight can then be used to set up policies to automate the appropriate actions, like open a smarter ticket or kill a bad instance of a microservice or provision more virtual machines. So to show you what we've done here, I'm thrilled to welcome up Eli Greenfield, VP of our Platform Engineering and Operations. Eli?
Hey, David.
How are you?
Good. Super excited, actually, to be showing off what we're doing with the Cognition Engine and some of the investments that we're making into more of the insights and actioning pillars in the product. So to do that, I've got a brand new, fresh out of the box installation of AppDynamics here that is looking at what is sort of a typical customer environment. Now this one is probably a lot smaller and simpler than what a lot of our customers see. But even so, all is not well in Denmark here, right? Our customers are happily sleeping. But if you look down at these two charts at the bottom here, you can see that the load on the application is starting to drop while the response time is starting to go up. That's not a good combination, right? So now normally, if this wasn't a fresh installation, we'd have done some configuration on AppDynamics, and we'd have set up some health rules, and a bunch of these tiers that we're seeing on the flow map here would be turning up red, and our application team, our ops team would be getting woken up in the middle of the night, and they'd come to AppDynamics and they'd start poking around through all there as they see, and trying to understand the problem and figure out which of those are relevant and which ones aren't. But in this case, even though this is fresh out of the box, because we've got the new Cognition Engine in there, from day one, it's watching the application, watching the data coming through, and very quickly learning what's normal and what's not, which metrics are normal compared to what they've been doing historically over time, and also which metrics are normal compared to how they're doing to each other. So in a situation like this, where load's going down and response time is going up, the Cognition Engine is going to kick in and throw up an anomaly, even though we haven't configured it at all. So sure enough, if I look in the upper right here under our events, you see there's a couple anomalies that have been started here. And if I click in there, I'll grab the bottom one here. And we see the Cognition Engine, in addition to noticing the data coming through is out of band and figuring out that something's going wrong, it's actually collected all the information from around the entire data set that we've pulled for the customer into one screen to show exactly what's relevant to quickly get to the root cause of this particular problem. So to start off here, we have up here, it tells us exactly what business transaction is going wrong here. So clearly, as an ops organization, I'm going to care when checkout is going wrong. Right? The second thing it does is it gives me a very clear, concise explanation of why it thinks something's going wrong with checkout. So in this case, it says that average response time is deviating and the 95th percentile response time is deviating. Across the top here, you see it gives me a timeline of the incident. So in this case, we're looking at one that's actually happened in the past. So you can see right around 1:30 a.m., things started to go south, and the anomaly was started. And then around 2 a.m., my team got into gear. They saw what was going on. They triggered an action. They made a change, and the problem was resolved by around 2:04 a.m.
Right. And so this, in many ways, is a huge sort of inversion in some sense of the user experience we've given in the past, right? The application topology that we walked through with Whitney earlier is a broad-based view of everything happening in your environment. This is really somehow different. This is much more simplified. Can you talk a little bit about the design and why we ended up with this flow map here?
Sure. So this obviously looks like the flow map that we had on the application screen when we were looking at it at first. But it's different in that, in this case, it's designed specifically to lead you to the root cause of the problem at hand. So, like I said, a typical customer environment will have thousands, hundreds of thousands of tiers or applications potentially. So that flow map can get very dense and very complex. It's useful for seeing the overall picture, but when you know exactly which portion of it is relevant to the task you're trying to take on and the incident you're trying to resolve, it can be extraneous. It can be extra information you don't need. So the Cognition Engine has actually is showing us in this case a version of the flow map that is very simplified. It's stripped a lot of the data away. It's showing us only the tiers that are actually connected to this business transaction that is having a problem. And it's showing us the ones that are red, the tiers that are showing their own problem. And in this case, it's actually dug down, looked at those, and figured out which of the problems on which tiers are the most likely cause of the overall problems that we're seeing on the BT. So here you see it's almost Google Maps style, drawn me directly to, with its marker, our payment service. And it's saying, hey, the number one most likely cause here is the payment service. And sure enough, if I look over on the left, it's showing me the top 2 suspected causes, and it's telling me that the checkout BT was probably affected by CPU usage spiking on our payment service, which sounds like a likely culprit. So if I click down in here, it actually gives me more details specifically about this root cause. So it gives me a timeline of when there were problems happening on the payment service specifically. It shows me the metrics on the business transaction that it sees clearly were elevated and out of our normal band range there that caused the anomaly to begin with. And if I scroll down, it shows me similar metrics that it's seeing on the payment tier in this case that were out of band, again, highly elevated at about the same time, which is how it's decided that this is probably the root cause. And if I keep scrolling down here, it shows me actually which specific nodes in my payment tier are showing the problem, and I could click into those and actually dig down and see more details about that node specifically.
Right, and at AppD over the last many years, one of the things we've always talked about is we want to be the company that gives you the fewest clicks to root cause identification. This is really 0 clicks to identification, and it's a really big deal in terms of shortening the incident time and getting you to solving the right problem quickly. But what actually I get more excited about here is that if you have the true root cause, as Nancy and I were talking about, then you can start to actually automate the remediation of that cause and not even necessarily have to be involved in that on an incident by incident basis. So can you show us how you take this and actually connect it up to an action?
Sure. So we've had the Action Engine in AppDynamics for a while. The new Cognition Engine is now tied directly into it, just like our health rules were before. And in fact, if you look at this incident here, if I collapse these suspected causes, you can see we actually had some actions tied to this incident. And in this case, we took a very light step. We just fired a notification into our Slack channel, so the team gets woken up and can start the discussion. But the actioning engine can pretty much tie into any process or any backend system you have. So if I show you, just to show you an example here, if I dug into our policies and I wanted to sort of dive into the shallow end of the pool and start simple, I can actually set up a policy that says, whenever the Cognition Engine finds any problem, no matter what, if it goes critical, I'm going to go ahead and wire up an action, which in this case just goes ahead and logs a ticket into our ServiceNow installation, right? So very lightweight. We're not deep into the automation there. But the more I know about what's happening and the more I come to trust the Cognition Engine and start to understand the problems, the more I can start to rely on automation to just solve the problem for me. So for example, let's imagine that in this case, this incident keeps happening again and again, and we're having problems with our payment service. We can't quite figure out what it is, but we do know how to at least solve the temporary problem. I could go back here and instead of just triggering an action on any anomaly, I could get very specific and say, in this case, because I know exactly what's happening here, whenever a health rule violation starts, and that health rule violation is, in this case, for our payment service, it was a CPU problem, and it's only on the payment service I want to do this. I don't want to get too ambitious. So I'll say on our specific tier, in this case, it's our, if I can scroll down, it's our payment service here. Now, because I know exactly what the problem is and we've practiced what the remediation is, I can go and tie, instead of into our ticketing system, I could tie this directly into a script that pokes our Kubernetes system and it increases the container limit, say, on our payment service.
Right, and this is actually something we see a lot of our customers do. We actually consider it a best practice, which is when things go wrong, let us help you automate smarter tickets, right? You can integrate directly into ServiceNow or Jira ticket, into Slack, and bring more of the information you need to get the war room more productive out of the gate. But as you see certain patterns forming, what we see customers doing is for the ones that are more that are happening on a repeated basis, where the remediation is actually a fairly safe automation step, what we see them doing is actually starting to take that step to actually automate the remediation. And just getting back to that point on AIOps, it's not a binary switch that you do automation or you don't do automation. It's a journey that we're all going to be on over the course of the next decade. And we encourage all of you to just start simple and find 1 or 2 things that you can automate and then start to add to that over time. Now, as we talked about, the nirvana state here is where most of your things are now automated. And that's going to be a journey that plays out over the next few years. Let's show folks where we think we end up in this. And let's talk about sort of the eventuality of this journey.
Sure. So like you said, it's a journey that our customers are on. Yeah. It's a journey that the product's on as well. And we're introducing the Cognition Engine today. Our goal with the Cognition Engine is to get to the point where it can get the information that you need to solve to take an action and decide how to solve the problem, down to the point where it's so small it can fit on the screen of your phone. Right? So you don't have to go fire up a browser, get in a war room. You can pull out your phone, see the data, and assuming that it's something you know what to do, you can fire an action directly from there. So I actually have a prototype here of some of the stuff that we're working on. So let me switch over here. This is, imagine you're out walking around in either San Francisco or some European country. I'm not sure where this person is. And you get an alert on your phone, right? Cognition Engine is kicked in and say, hey, an anomaly has started, just like we saw in the demo. I can click on this to get more details of that alert, and sure enough, it's that same key pieces of information that the Cognition Engine has decided exactly why there's a problem and what I need to see. So it's identified a couple metrics that are out of band, and if I drill down into this, it will show me root cause. Again, if I scroll down, here are my checkout metrics versus the metrics on my payment service. And again, if this is something that I know exactly what's going on and we've got the right action set up, I can go ahead and just click that, and I've got a couple actions to choose from. In this case, I just say, go ahead and restart the server. Right. Simple as that.
Great. Thank you so much, Eli, and really excited about the journey ahead. And
yeah.
Thanks. Take care.
My pleasure.
Great. So AppDynamics now is well on its way to becoming a platform that you can rely on for visibility across complex distributed multi-cloud environments, a platform you can rely on for insight to identify root cause of incidents, and a platform that you can count on to start to incrementally take actions to actually remediate the incidents that are forming, ideally before they start to impact your users. Now, over the last decade, AppDynamics has set the bar for APM, and you can count on us over the next decade to set the bar for automation at the app layer. In parallel, Cisco has been working on a similar solution for the infrastructure and network layer called ACI. And together, we've been working with the ACI team to provide a deep integration between AppDynamics and ACI. Organizations that are using both of these technologies will now start to experience unparalleled visibility, insight, and actioning across domains. And this is a big deal. In fact, what we're giving you is a central nervous system that's starting to pull information and telemetry from any part of your technology stack and start to commingle that information so you can really understand the deeper impact of a network change or an infrastructure change or an application change on your end user experience. So with that, I'm thrilled to announce that today, AppDynamics and ACI integration is available to all our customers. To show us a little bit about that, I'd like to invite up Devarshi Shah. Devarshi is the technical marketing engineer for ACI. So Devarshi, we spent a little bit of time earlier in the session talking about how AppDynamics provides end-to-end visibility. And one of the things we do is we look at network and infrastructure through the lens of an application. Think of it as a really broad way of looking at, is your network or infrastructure affecting your application? But ACI is a much deeper look at that from a diagnostics and management perspective. Can you share a little bit about what ACI does, and just recognize this is an audience predominantly of DevOps folks, so maybe share with them a little bit of what...
So this is the audience who gives me a call at 2 in the night, the network ops.
Exactly.
Cool. So ACI is the most widely deployed SDN solution in the industry. Your workloads are running in different environments. They could be running in your data center on-prem, they could be running in colos, they could be running at the edge, or in the public cloud. And these workloads are either virtualized, bare metal servers, or containers even. ACI is the network for all of them. Now, ACI is primarily an SDN-based architecture, so you have a controller, which is the brains behind the entire network. What ACI does is it automates the connectivity of your endpoints, network operations monitoring, and it has a consistent security policy model, so you can have your compliance needs taken care of. The policy model of ACI is completely open, which has enabled us to build a rich ecosystem of 65+ technology partners and AppDynamics being one of the most important ones.
Great. Now, it's been great working with all of you. And again, historically, these have been two very different worlds, right? They have been separated in many ways, not just from the technology and the data model, but also in terms of the users. And today's announcement really brings those two worlds together in a new way. Let's take a look. Let's see how this works.
Sure. So what you are seeing on the screen right now is the network dashboard on the AppD controller. And you see a bunch of application components which are connected to each other by the ACI fabric. Now the network dashboard right now, you see the different components being pretty healthy. They are following the baselines that have been established. But what happens in the real world? You have application being deployed at a very rapid rate, and the network has to keep up with it. And a lot of time what happens is the networking policies might be misconfigured or might not keep up with the requirements of the application. This leads to application performance degradation. Let's switch over to the live demo and see what happens then. So this is the exact same application that you saw earlier in a healthy state, but because of a configuration error in the network, you see the order tier, which is highlighted in red, some health rule violations happening. And if I drill down further, I can see two links that are going out of the order tier. One to a load balancer and the second to the payment tier. And if you look closer on the link between order and payment, see a lot of network errors happening, performance impacting errors happening. So we can take a look at this on the AppD dashboard by looking at the network performance metrics. And as you can see, we have a lot of retransmits going on, TCP losses going on. So it clearly alludes to a networking issue that's there. And with this integration, what we've done is we've given you the ability to go from AppD into ACI with the exact context of the error that's happening in the network. So we can go ahead and say, go to connections and troubleshoot on ACI. So we are going into ACI and the controller for ACI, which is APIC. And what you see here is the visibility and troubleshooting dashboard for ACI.
Yeah, now this is, it's easy to get lost in sort of the technology here for a minute, so let me bring it up a level for a second. So what we saw in AppDynamics was the order tier calling the payment tier from the application perspective. And we started to recognize and isolate to say, hey, there seems to be a problem here that's associated with the network, right? But we didn't have the diagnostics to go deep into the network at the level that something like ACI does. We've come over directly into ACI, and now we're looking at the same order tier to payment tier call, but at the network level.
That's precisely right, David. So what you see here on the screen is the networking topology as it relates to these two application components. So you see here the application order tier is connected to the switch leaf 102, and the payment tier is connected to leaf 103 right here, and both of these switches are connected to the spine. So you see the networking topology evolve. Now once you have this, you have an idea of what's going on in the network and how is my application connected to the network. The second thing that you can do is you can go into drops and statistics and see if there are any drops happening at the network level. So this will load up in just a moment, where you will see if there are any faults associated with the network. So you don't see any drops on leaf 101, the interface that is connected to the order tier. But if I go here, I do see some drops happening on leaf 103, which has the payment tier connected to it. So this gives me an idea of where the drops are happening. I can go down even further and take a look at the contract. So contract is a policy construct which defines ACL as well as forwarding for ACI. And if I look at the source to destination contract here, I can see some hits for a deny, which means the packets are getting dropped here.
Right.
So if I fix this, the issue will be resolved.
So it was the network that was causing the problem.
In this case.
Okay, so this is a really big deal, right? Because how often have we seen people working in these individual silos having to make the best decision they know how to on behalf of their companies and their customers? And here was a relatively straightforward security policy change that had all these unintended consequences up the stack that ended up negatively impacting the customers and the business, right? And so by bringing these domains together, we really understand end-to-end what the impact is. How is this possible? I mean, these have been historically so divided at so many levels. How did we bring these together?
So this is made possible by the data models that we have on AppD as well as ACI. The policy model that we have on ACI is very similar to that of AppD. And what I'm going to show you on the screen right now is the view of both these policy models merged together and shown to a network operator. So what you see here at the bottom are the application components that are discovered by AppD, nodes, which network admins did not have any idea of which networking component it relates to. So if you go further up the tree, this is how each and every node and how each and every tier of the application relates to your networking components, how it is connected to the fabric, how it is having security policies configured. So this is a very powerful view, and this is possible because of the model.
Great. Thank you, Devarshi. It's been great working with you and the entire ACI team, and look forward to a lot more collaboration in the years ahead. Thank you, David. So at AppD, we've always said that collecting metrics is cheap. There are lots of ways you can collect a lot of telemetry. The power is in correlating those metrics. We believe that's where the value is truly created. And correlating AppDynamics data model with the ACI's data model is a huge step forward for us and for our joint customers. But we're just getting started. So to share a little bit more about what's in store for AppDynamics in the context of Cisco, I'm thrilled to invite up Anuj Kapoor, Cisco's Chief Strategy Officer. Anuj, good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Yeah, thank you. So, so we've had a pretty broad-ranging conversation this morning, and we've talked a lot about first of all, the big investment Cisco made to acquire AppDynamics, the investment that you all have made in AppDynamics over the last couple of years, and just showed one of the big integration points that we've had with Cisco. Now, Cisco has historically been seen as the network and infrastructure company. What role does AppDynamics play, and what should that mean for the industry? What should that signal to the industry in terms of Cisco's broader strategy?
It's interesting. You can't actually talk about AppDynamics without first talking about the application and the role that it's had in our strategic imperatives, actually dating back to 2013. That's when we actually launched a new policy-based model for data center automation with the application at its core. And over the years, what we've started to see is a number of leading-edge corporations start to put the application front and center of their journey towards hybrid IT, multi-cloud, and digital transformation. That's actually what led us to AppDynamics. Now, you're right that historically we've sold to the infrastructure buyers, but as their mandate has evolved to include application agility and user experience, so have their KPIs. In fact, we're very excited about the AppDynamics visibility packs that provide application awareness to the infrastructure, offer unparalleled KPIs and stakeholder impact and ROI, and really de-risk the path towards digital transformation that most of our customers are actually going through.
Great. Yeah, actually, that's one of the things we haven't had a chance to talk about this morning are these AppDynamics visibility packs. So for anyone joining this from that has been a traditional Cisco network infrastructure customer, this is a way for you to effectively snack your way up to understanding the application impact of the infrastructure changes that you're making. And so, certainly please feel free to talk to us about that as well. Now, beyond this, as we continue to, and we will obviously, this being one big step forward, continue to integrate more with Cisco products. One of the questions that I get asked on a regular basis is, AppD's always been a really important open part of our overall platform. How much is AppD going to focus on the open ecosystem, and how much is AppD going to start to focus more on advantaging Cisco hardware? I've obviously been able to answer this question, but I think it's best coming from you. How would you answer that?
That's a very relevant question. Look, we strongly believe that the application and infrastructure layers need to be more tightly coordinated, where changes in one ultimately drive changes in the other. But we're also recognizing the fact that the IT environments at most of our customers are open. They're multi-vendor, they're heterogeneous. And that's something we're committed to in terms of building out an ecosystem. In fact, I'll give you sort of two examples. The gentleman previously talked about ACI. 5 years into the launch of ACI, we integrate with 65 other companies. Some of those are our competitors. In fact, one of the more stronger examples of our commitment to sort of solving the customer problem, regardless of the vendors that they actually choose, is in security. We're the largest enterprise IT security vendor. And 5 years into the launch of a program around the Cisco Security Technical Alliance, we have 160 integrations across 280 platforms. Now, you can imagine in the security market, a lot of those are with our competitors, but we're committed to solving sort of the customer problem first in an open and transparent way, and the ecosystem is a big part of that.
Yeah, and as part of the AppD ecosystem within Cisco, I can attest to the fact that this is something that I've been extremely excited about, is being able to integrate more tightly with Cisco products, but also having incremental investment that lets us invest in the broader ecosystem just as aggressively, if not more aggressively as well. So, and then maybe last question, and sort of a big, broad, open one, AIOps. This is something that everyone is talking about AIOps today. We've talked about what we're doing as a first step in terms of integrating ACI and AppDynamics, but clearly there's a broader view that I think Cisco can take, given the domains that Cisco plays in. How would you position Cisco and sort of the focus on automation across the IT infrastructure and farm, in the years ahead from Cisco?
Yeah, it's interesting. So before I came into this role, I was actually in the security business, and we used to have this saying to our CIOs and CISOs, which is every instinct you have and every driver you see that forces you to transform also increases the surface area of attacks and the blast radius of potential vulnerabilities. So it was, in a way, our desire to sort of get them to focus on the need to balance between driving agility, enabling business transformation, and managing risk. When we look at AIOps, we see the same sort of tension play out between developers and the ops persona. I think one analyst called it, over the last 5 years, they've seen a renaissance in software development. It's a golden age of software development. Developers have limitless or unlimited choice in terms of what to build and where to deploy it. That, with it, creates complexity. And that's a complexity that sort of needs to be balanced with the agility that you drive. So what our customers have been telling us, and it's probably accelerated in the last 2 years, is the need to go from being sort of reactive to proactive and to cognitive, to move away from sort of chasing alerts to actually driving down mean time to resolution, almost in an automated way, helped out with AI. And automation has been a central theme for Cisco over the last 18 months, ever since the launch of the Network Intuitive. We strongly believe that we have sort of unparalleled visibility, telemetry, insights across infrastructure tiers, across the domains you mentioned, between the data center, the campus, the branch, and the cloud. And that puts us in a unique position to be the partner of choice for enterprises as they look to manage their dynamic IT estate on their path to digital transformation.
Yeah, and it's been great to see and participate in that ecosystem. Thank you very much,
Thank you so much,
for everything.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So with that, we've covered a lot of ground today. Here are some of the key takeaways I want to make sure you all walk away with. First, continued investment, heavy investment in application monitoring and business monitoring around coverage and around scale. And today in particular, we announced our focus on serverless and Lambda as we move forward over the course of the next few months. Second, we launched a brand new vector of innovation with the Cognition Engine. We build on the foundation over the last decade in visibility, and we're now able to, over the next decade, continue this path forward to find most incidents. And we'll continue down this way until we find most incidents and automatically remediate those incidents on your behalf. And third, we announced that we've deeply integrated AppDynamics and Cisco ACI, which is a huge step forward, bringing together DevOps and infrastructure data models in a way that's never been done before, which will eventually make that Cognition Engine and the path to automation and remediation even smarter and even broader. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us for the journey ahead. If you're interested in learning more or having more of a one-on-one conversation on any of this, please register at appdynamics.com/transform and look forward to the journey ahead with all of you over the next many years. Thank you.